Now, speaking of John Byrne, when we talked the other day, you told me, I asked you about how you got into comics, and you had a fantastic story that, if you wouldn't mind recounting for the
John
folks.
hates this story. He yelled at me on the internets when I first got on the internets, when it was like all the green screen with a flashing white cursor, and still didn't really know how to use it, because I'm very proud of this story. I went to my first comic convention. Like my father started buying comics for me. Every Friday he would bring, if I saw he had a little green bag under his arm, it meant he went to the newsstand and maybe there was a comic in there for me. So he did that for a while, but then he was driving around one day and saw that there was such a thing as a comic book store. And one Saturday he took me there to Rick's One Stop Comics, where then afterwards every dime I ever earned went to back issues, because I needed to complete my collection of X-Men and I needed all these comics. And Rick actually had a section where he had foreign comics like manga, and this was like nothing was translated even, it was just that he had some, but he had it all kind of like thrown in one area.
Yeah.
And it was, the typical store that most people would be frightened of. It was not so bad, but it smelled like paper and was dank, and it was I was definitely the only girl in there. And it smelled kind of, musty like old books and whatnot, so I thought it was like heaven. And when my father took me there, I became kind of a regular customer, and one day by the cash register, Rick had a little sign up for like Chicago Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Which was in a hotel on Michigan Avenue, and just like it was in a couple ballrooms, or like a ballroom in an annexed room at the time. And I was like, "What's this?" And he's like, Jill, I think you like to go to that thing." And I'm like, "What is it?" And he goes, "No, it's all them artists you like, the comics, these comics, that John Byrne guy, he's gonna be there." What? How? When? How do I get there? And he's like, "No, it's on Sunday, and I can sell you a ticket for it, and it's got you can go meet him, and there's other guys, they sell all comics, and there's guys drawing and stuff." And I'm like, "Oh my God, Daddy, I have to go to this. Daddy, please, I have to go to this," because I wouldn't be able to get downtown by myself. So my father takes me to the convention, the first and last convention that he went to. After that, he just dropped his 13-year-old daughter off in a room with like 35-year-old men and left her there for the afternoon, and listened to the ball game in the parking lot of the hotel, or in some parking lot. But he would drop me off at 12, and he'd say, "Okay, I'm gonna be at 4:30. I'm gonna be in front of this place. You better be standing in front of there." I was like, and I'd come up with comics and be all excited. But this particular convention was like I had my sketchbook with me, which was kind of like I think even at the time I didn't even have, maybe it was just a spiral bound sketchbook. I said, because I graduated up from just a notebook, like a loose leaf notebook paper, or spiral bound notebook.
Yeah.
With all my drawings of Dazzler, where she's standing in a way that human beings can't stand because your anatomy doesn't work like that. So I'm wandering around, and I've got my babysitting money with me, because I'm going to buy comics, and I bought a lot of John Buscema Conan's, and then saw there's the table, there are two guys, and they're right by the door, and it was Terry Austin and John Byrne, and I believe Howard Chaykin was at maybe at one of the conventions at the same time.
Wow.
But they're sitting there, and there's a group of men in front of John. Of course, they want to get sketches, and some guy, and I think John was charging like $10 or maybe $20 for a sketch or something like that. But I'd already spent my $20, and that was all the money I had, and I had my comics, and I didn't know what to do, but I stood there and watched him. It was just amazing to watch him draw. But John is a brusque and sarcastic fellow, which at the time I didn't
quite diplomatic.
I didn't understand in any way whatsoever. I didn't get sarcasm, because that just what it looked like was he was the super angriest guy that hated everyone that was trying to give him money. And I wanted to be one of those people that gave him money, but he was going to make fun of me even if I had money. No, I was not asking for a picture of Vampirella with her top taken down like some of the guys were. So what he was doing was telling these guys that you're super horrible creeps and get away from me, because she's mostly naked anyway, and go home and do your business to whatever you need to do your business to. I'm not drawing it for you.
Yeah, I mean, you could have somebody draw Vampirella and just use an eraser and make
She's
it
wearing
new.
a string, you know. It's like, for God's sakes, you know, yeah, that's not enough for you. You're pervert. So he was interacting with these people, and you know, now that I would love to be able to think of the actual terms that he used, because I know he was making some hilarious and, you know, awesome, you know, one-liners about some of these guys. And some guys were, of course, you know, regular too. But I stayed there for hours watching him draw. And I was in this cluster of people, and I would move, like I would get closer to the table, and I would get within, you know, maybe a person of him, and then I would move all the way back and let a bunch of other guys go in front of me because I just was too afraid. But Terry Austin, I guess, had been watching me all day long doing this, you know, crazy dance. And finally he said, "Do you have something you want to show John?" And I was like, "Yes." and he was like, I go, "Well, I want to draw comics, and he's my favorite, and I've got a sketchbook, but I don't think I should show it to him." And he goes, "Well, why don't you show it to me?" And I was like, "Okay." And I gave him my sketchbook, and he looked through it, and then he nudged John and said, "John, this girl's been standing here all day. She'd like to draw comics, and she wants to show you her art. And just give it to me." And so he took my book, and he's like, got it open, and he's looking through it, and he slams it shut. And kind of tosses it down on the table and goes, "I think we should break her fingers." And I'm like, you know, like, it's like I'm sweating, and I know I've turned red and all sorts of stuff, and you know, and then he goes, "'Cause if she's this good now, when she's this young, she's gonna be really, really, really good when she's old enough to draw comics." And I was like, it's like, oh, I understood that he was saying that it wasn't bad. You know? It took me a minute, and then I took my sketchbook back, and it was like, you know, I don't even know if I thanked him, but I was just like, I have to go out because my dad's coming to get me. And you know, I went home and I wrote Terry Austin a letter, care of Marvel Comics, and he wrote me back. And I carried that letter with me, like, until it fell apart. And I think I was in high school by the time it fell apart, but I carried it in, like, my folder, because this was my comic fantasy, was that one day I was going to be old enough to, you know, or good enough to draw comics, because I constantly would send samples into all the companies. But one day I would take my portfolio and I would, I don't know, fly to New York, and I would go to the office and I would have an interview with somebody, and I'd show them my art, and they would go, "Oh my God, this is fantastic. Hey, everyone, stop! Fire those other guys. Jill Thompson's going to be drawing the X-Men right now, and Terry Austin's going to ink it." And it was going to be, you know, it's the most amazing thing. You know, it's like everyone else would, you know, whoever was drawing it, you know, wouldn't be drawing it anymore, because I was going to get to do it. And that's my story of meeting. Well, not really meeting John Byrne, but you know, like.
That's a fantastic story. I mean, you know, for somebody, a young hopeful, you couldn't ask for anything better than that. Well, other than to like say, okay, we're going to actually sign you up to draw the book at this point.
Well, I kept coming back to that little convention, and I met other artists there who then not only did they look at my art, but then they started giving me pointers. You know, they started telling me what was actually wrong with my art and how to fix it. And I would go home and I would do what they said, and then come back to the next convention to like show them, because I'm like a very good student as far as like I want to get good grades, I want to get the A, and I also want to impress my teacher. So it's like I was taking everything they said to heart.
Yeah.
I wasn't taking it as, oh my God, they think I suck. It was, and then when they suggested you should go to art school, and then you know, this was Bill Reinhold and Bill Willingham and Mitch O'Connell, I think at the time, and Mitch and Bill Reinhold both went to the American Academy of Art in Chicago, and they said you should go to our school that we graduated from. You know, and take everything they offer you, and don't do comics there. Like, do comics when you're at home, but
Yeah.
learn everything that they're going to teach you. Take every class you possibly can and learn what it is. Everything that you are going to learn there, you can just apply to comics. Because it's about design and painting and color theory and perspective and life drawing, and these are all things you need to make a good comic and a good story. And I did that.
So what was your first professional comics job, and how did you get it?
I was still a teenager, and my first professional comics job is a crappy looking thing. I guess it's kind of okay for the age I was, but it was for a little independent comic called Just Imagine Comics and Stories. And I ended up working for them. They were also a retailer, or not even necessarily a retailer with a shop. They would just come to conventions and set up and sell books, but they would also publish this little anthology comic. And they were doing they had regular things that they would run in there. One of them was a thing by Phil Folio called Buckado, Zapdo for Hire. Yeah. So that was like basically what they were publishing. And then some other stories to fill up the rest of it. And I would go on the road with these guys. You know, we'd travel like anywhere that was like within a night's drive from Chicago. It was like Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Iowa, and set up at little shows. And I would work for them, which meant like I helped them set up, and I supposedly was supposed to run the table, but they would let me just go to Artist Alley and watch everybody draw, and then I'd be there to finish helping them, pack up and then drive back home. And I was like, 15 when I started doing that. I think they published something by me when I was like 15 or 16, and they paid me, but they needed filler for the issue that they could put out, and there was a silly character that they made up called Banana Man, and it was a dude that was like a superhero parody, and he had this huge banana thing on his head, and he had, bananas that he would throw at people, and like giant, like every stupid thing a superhero has that would make him completely impossible to work. And they sat around and they came up with a simple story that was pretty much banana jokes, and I drew whatever they told me to draw, and then we went to Artist Alley and had artists ink a panel. So it was done by the time that we went home, and I think my first work was like inked by Butch Geis, who was drawing Micronauts at the time, and Joe Staten and some other people. I'm trying to think who else may have had a hand in that. And some of my crude and terrible drawings, but I guess it kind of helped that they sent the little girl over to see, can you please do this for me? And it was kind of okay. It's like, I'll take 15 minutes and do that. So that was my first published work. And then after that, they published another Banana Man story, which was written by Jack Herman, who used to write the Elementals that I worked on. He has also written a lot of video games. He's a co-creator of Villains and Vigilantes, but that was another Banana Man story, and it was a parody of Superman 2. And it was Banana Man faces 3 fruits of greater or equal or greater powers, and it was rotten apple, nice chair, she was the girl, and sour grapes. And it was actually a really funny parody. And it was pretty good for the age I was. But I remember coming, after I was done with my homework, I'd lay on the floor in front of the TV with my big comic book, once I knew what size comic books were supposed to be, drawing my comics.
Now, you worked on the Elementals, on the main feature. Yeah. Was that, like drawing the X-Men for you, being the team?
Well, I love that comic, so it was super awesome to be able to draw that, and that was like
how old were you when you did that?
I was like 19, I think.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing.
Something like that.